Brian.
Yeah, thank you for the time. Let me just pull up my notes here. I'm going to do this podcast style, not just because I have a fancy microphone, but um, don't have slides today. I want to just kind of riff a little bit on just some of my thoughts and perspective as a graduating consortia, and appreciate the time to share with all of you. Um, the team sent some kind of great thought-provoking questions as I was preparing some comments to share with all of you today. So I've kind of organized this by way of just thinking about what has changed, what for our organization, what our communication looks like moving forward, and themes of sustainability throughout. So I hope it's fruitful for those of you on the call. By way of introduction, Brian Harmon, President and CEO of the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation. We are connected to the North American Mitochondrial Disease Consortium. All acronyms aside today, we'll spell it all out. But a proud partner of NAMDC, at least in my time here, for over 6 years. I'm coming up on 6 years in our consortia, clearly wrapping up after a nice long run. I'm proud to share that overall as an organization, I feel like we have come out as a much stronger organization. We have found ourselves well positioned to steward the mitochondrial disease research ecosystem, due large in part to an integrated partnership with our consortia, with NAMDC. To me, highlights include our ability to build these relationships over the course of 15 plus years, and NAMDC's recognition of our patient advocacy group as what I would describe as a credible and equal partner. That was something that we have felt early and often in this process. We never felt like, oh, we were just a sweet little patient advocacy group and get out of our way. We know what we're doing. We've always saw ourselves as equal partners and they helped us establish credibility out of the gate. Our PI in particular really helped encourage deep patient advocacy group involvement from the get-go. And that never waned. So a shout out to Dr. Michio Hirano from Columbia University, who made it a point that UMDF, as the premier PAG partner in this, was always seen as an equal voice at the table. As I think about and reflect on benefits of being part of CPAG and RDCRN overall, for someone who has a C- in biology and has come to this with a perspective more about the development and the marketing and the awareness side of the house, that's more of my background. I'll just share, albeit I was not involved as much as I should have been and would have liked to be. I have a really strong number two who was involved with the network. I take great pride and reflect on the benchmarking opportunities, the networking opportunities. Case in point, Kristen, who's following me today, is coming to speak at my conference here in a couple of weeks to share case studies from her organization. But for this network, those connections are harder to make. So understanding war stories that we all share, in many cases, resource sharing. I think that's a place that CPAG and RDCRN can really hang their hat, a marketplace to share resources and connect professionals who are all on the daily grind of moving these rare diseases forward. So anytime our jobs can be easier to help the patient families we serve, that's a really good thing. And that's one of the big things I take away from this group here. Reflecting on what we've been able to do in partnering with our consortium that couldn't have happened without this partnership. First and foremost, navigating the complex arena of multi-institutional clinical research. Again, a guy who has limited background on that as a CEO of this organization, to know that we were set up for success by way of connecting us to the best and brightest in our disease space and helping an organization like ours navigate that from a clinical research perspective, that is really important. It helps us gain insight on how it all works. And I found this to be even more telling as we are deep into our process of sustainability, that this ongoing constant education between the PAGs and the consortia, how important that is for the PAGs to be able to go out and be recognized as a credible source for sustainability, for stewarding these projects moving forward. So I'm grateful that NAMDC in particular was helpful in educating our patient advocacy group along the way. It gave us a broad perspective that's necessary to form plans and formulate an ecosystem for the greater mito community. So this is one element of what I keep describing as our ecosystem. We have clinical research, we're going to have patient-focused research, our own registries, genetic testing, all the things that I'm sure all of you are working on, understanding that this is an important element of that and how it interconnects to everything we do. But for our partnership through RDCRN, I don't think we would have been able to make that case and make that happen. This is a little bit of the proof in the pudding for us. Around collaborative successes, things that we've learned, particularly around strengthening our relationships with PIs, or with our PI, excuse me. Very grateful, and I hope this is the case with most everyone who benefits from this program, we had scheduled, frequent, thoughtful communication. Every week, we have a one-on-one for at least an hour with Dr. Harmon. Grateful for his time commitment. And that's just the baseline. Of course, there's a hotline to his desk, and that extends to all the investigators who are part of it. I think many of us benefit from this, and it was something that really actually surprised me coming from major children's hospitals and then to the rare disease community. The level of access that's afforded to our patient advocacy group here at UMDF is something that's very inspiring. I think it's really what makes this program tick, is that there's not questions about will we be able to connect, can we get answers, but taking that opportunity to schedule that out and know that it's always there on the calendar, that really helps strengthen our relationship with Dr. Harmon and ultimately with the rest of the investigators. We made a very concerted effort to engage Dr. Harmon and the entire group in our organizational annual planning. So while we certainly would be remiss if we didn't work through NAMDC specific planning, as UMDF as a patient advocacy group also invested in the program with our own resources, we extended that to make sure that he was a voice at the table on overall planning for our organization, particularly for a group like us that, as the largest mitochondrial disease group at only $4 million a year, resources, of course, like many of us face, are spread thin. And sometimes that requires tough conversations to be had. So to have Dr. Harmon at the table as we could elevate and navigate the importance of this program to our other stakeholders who may not be benefiting from UMDF's financial investment that year, it was important to have him be part of that planning. We also made it an effort since the inception of the grant to support an annual investigator meeting. And that was always in conjunction with our organization's annual meeting. So for 25 plus years, we've hosted a clinician, researcher, patient family conference that has traveled across the country. And since the dawn of this grant, we have built in a NAMDC specific meeting that would start the day before our big conference. So our staff and leadership, the docs, are already traveling in. They have a full day to work through strategic planning. I get to come and give highlights of our organization, how they fit into the puzzle, and of course, thank them for all their good work. I think those are some of the key points that have led to just some of our collaborative successes. Probably stating the obvious, but frequent, thoughtful, transparent communication, and both parties welcoming the other party into their annual planning process. Lessons learned, just to put a bow on some of these conversations things and some of the more important things we've learned from our experience. Under what do I wish we would have known earlier? Benchmarking the patient advocacy group financial support on top of the grant. So as I mentioned, each year we have made a commitment to support a coordinator. We've made a commitment to help fund rising stars in research that come through the program, through the NAMDC Gateway grants. These are commitments that UMDF is making on top of the NIH commitment to help strengthen the program. I would have liked to come to a group like this and kind of better understand what that landscape looks like. How can we have the most impact as a patient advocacy group with limited resources to round out this program. One thing looking back, I wish I would have known a little bit more about that earlier, both the nature of what we do and the size of our commitment. Does this make a difference? Is underwriting staff support a good use of our dollars? And I'm not suggesting there was anything wrong with how we approached it, but I tend to think there's a more comprehensive look like that. It's very easy in our world to fund something and then the request comes like, yep, that sounds good again. Let's go. Here's where we can improve, but let's try to make that a little bit better moving forward. What would we have done differently? Point number one, and I would probably should say this like 20 times throughout these comments, plan for sustainability out of the gate. It will be here tomorrow. And even though we've had the luxury of renewed grants, and I'll put a little plug in here to whoever makes the magic happen of extensions on the grants. Our organization and NAMDC are most grateful for whatever happens on that front. But good, sound sustainability planning and working with your PI to understand the business aspect of that and how much work that really is to get it done. Admittedly, I think we started way too late in the game. We started having conversations about this day is coming. Let's start thinking, and we could do the back of the napkin stuff, but the getting people in a room to hammer it out, to be intentional about all this good work is being done. How does this live on when your environment is rare disease, small patient advocacy group, limited funding? And recognizing to do the big things that this requires, it goes beyond the original size of the grant anyways. So we've done some good work recently around this. We've built out sustainability committees. We brought in the key stakeholders or the key investigators to a meeting in New York to hammer it out over 2 days. That helps set a stage for UMDF to kind of prove that we can be a valid sustainability partner, a steward for this program moving forward. And because we have always involved NAMDC in the planning process, they're all aware of the other elements of our business and how they might fit in. And it also creates opportunities for discussions to say, here's that something was covered under NAMDC before, under our consortium before, that moving forward doesn't make sense for it to live there. And can we get hyper-focused with Harry on these elements of the grant? And that's what our group continues to work through right now. But I will say it's a little anxiety riddled as we start talking about, no offense to the brilliant minds who work on research who might be in this call, but you all are doing what you should be doing, thinking about how we help sick kids and adults with these diseases. And oftentimes, like the deep business development discussions doesn't generate out of that group. So leaders like me come in and say, this is great, let's make all the dreams come true, but now we have to have a plan for it. So I'm reiterating this again, like that plan for sustainability out of the gate is really important. Better understanding the intricacies of individual institutions, maybe stating the obvious here, but recognizing, at least in our consortia, there are the haves and there are the have-nots. There's those that are more motivated than others to participate. And I think as a leader of the patient advocacy group, kind of understanding if there are any politics, if there are kind of, I want to say internal controls, but just recognizing it's not always going to be equal in terms of people's motivation, involvement. I think we have an expectation and a standard of a baseline, but it's important for us to kind of recognize that as much as the consortium is set up to be somewhat homogenous, there's still individual institutions at play here, and making sure that's woven into plans. I would add here too importance of deepening the NIH relationships as much as the investigator relationships. And this is a place where I feel like I hadn't been as strong, haven't been as active in this as I would like. For anybody who would ever follow me or others that are going to be entering into this, take these opportunities very seriously and engage and connect with your peers, build deeper relationship with the NIH. I remember when I first came here, as a newbie, I was a little confused on like, what is this CPAG really all about here? How does the RDC really work? And I felt like it needed a buddy system. And at the risk of not being able to recognize everybody, kudos to this team that however it all changed like 4-ish years ago. So I think just leadership and different people getting involved. I don't think it was me saying it. That message may have been clear from others, but you all got a lot more organized, like the portal and the frequent communication, connecting us with fellow leaders, that dramatically changed. So I would say like put that on steroids. It's a really good thing. But taking that a step further for PAG leaders to understand what it means to deepen relationships with the NIH. So it doesn't feel like a mad rush to get answers when we might feel lost. And then again, most important things I've learned, just to wrap this up, again, shout out to NIH. Some big thing I've learned here is the significant and critical role that they play in advancing rare disease clinical research. I mean, we talk a lot about UMDF. I have the PR mantra of, but for the UMDF ... This doesn't happen. Like, but for us, there's no patient registry. But for us, we don't give out free genetic testing. But for us, we can't advance these programs. And it's that in many respects, but for the NIH, the advent of strong coordinated clinical research and consortia probably doesn't happen. Now it's our responsibility as sunsetting consortia and PAGs to find a way to take that gift and keep it running for thousands who are counting on us to do that each and every single day. So that's the big thing I've learned as a relative outsider coming into this and experience this over the past 6 years is we all play a really important role. And I know I'm preaching to the choir when we say there's many people who are counting on us every day to wake up and take that seriously. So thank you so much for an opportunity to share a little bit of my comments on this.
Thank you, Brian.